Chosen one. Every day the world sells noise dressed as life. It shouts at the nervous system until even silence feels suspicious. She has been told to chase some dazzling version of herself until breath becomes the currency and rest becomes a rumor. Then you appear, unhurried, not because you lack fire, but because you keep it banked where wisdom can reach it. Your quiet is not emptiness. It is a lake that knows the difference between reflection and depth. She does not fall into you. She sits beside you and remembers how to see. Stillness returns her eyesight to her. You did not inherit this calm like a fortune. You forged it like a bell. Bells are made by heat and hammer, by pour and patience, by cooling at the pace metal insists on. Your temperament rings true because you stayed long enough in the mold of discipline to take a shape that doesn't warp under weather. This is what her body hears when you say nothing. A timbre that refuses to rise for applause or fall under pressure. A note that resonates at a frequency bones trust. Words, when you use them, hang on that resonance like lanterns on a strong beam. They do not sway into drama or clang into threat. She breathes differently because your tone teaches her lungs a forgotten lesson, the lesson of enough. Stillness, in your keeping, is not a retreat from the world, but an intelligent refusal to be drafted by its panic. You watch urgency attempt its cheap magic, and you answer with cadence. Cadence organizes chaos. It does not deny it. You set a tempo that keeps comprehension alive. Comprehension is love's only reliable speed. At that speed, people stop mistaking adrenaline for truth. At that speed, mistakes become mendable because they are seen early and owned without theater. At that speed, her voice stops tripping over itself, trying to be believed, and simply speaks in the natural grammar of a human being who does not need to convince to exist. Most stillness in the wild is a mask for fear or a weapon of control. Yours is neither. It is a practiced availability to reality without needing to remodel it to flatter your legend. If a storm comes, you do not preach at the wind. You tie down what can be tied, and you wait without sulking. Waiting like that is not passivity. It is mastery over the compulsions that turn small weather into large damage. She sees you keep your hands off what time has not ripened yet. She watches you pick exactly what the day can carry. She notices you end the hour before exhaustion turns truth unkind. This is how her trust grows, one measured restraint at a time, each a minor mercy that keeps the whole from breaking. In your quiet, she hears permission. Permission to speak without packaging. Permission to change her mind without penalty. Permission to listen to the information in her breath before she hands the steering wheel to habit. Your stillness does not recruit her into a cult of slowness. It returns her to the dignity of pacing. Dignity is what happens when movement keeps faith with meaning. She begins to align her day like a spine, one vertebra at a time, each aligned to the next, so the body stands without apology. She says yes in full sentences and no without staging a trial. She gives attention where it multiplies life and withdraws it where it becomes someone else's leverage. Nothing about this is loud. Loudness has been masquerading as aliveness for too long. You are teaching her the soft thunder of order. A room learns how to breathe from the lungs that govern it. Your lungs do not perform serenity. They practice it. Practice looks unremarkable and feels miraculous. It is the way you drink water before an argument. The way you separate fact from feeling, then bless them back into conversation. The way you ask for 5 minutes not as escape but as stewardship. The way you laugh without undercutting the truth, and are serious without subtracting joy. These micro-rites turn the ordinary into an instrument the soul can play without injury. She takes up the instrument almost without noticing. Suddenly, mornings become places to begin rather than battlefields to survive. Afternoons remember they can be devoted to depth instead of to display. Nights cease to audition for romance and start to keep the room for rest. Stillness also governs how you hold the blade of honesty. In noisy hands, truth becomes a scythe. In yours, it becomes a surgeon's tool, sharp, clean, exact, guided by oath. You cut at the seam, not through the cloth. You name what is so without inflating it into a spectacle that scorches trust. She watches how your corrections never recruit humiliation to do the work pride should have done. She notices your apologies arrive with changed behavior rather than with bouquets of regret. The nervous system keeps score differently around such precision. It begins to believe in repair. Belief in repair is the rarest oxygen in relationships. Under it, tenderness dares to grow roots. Your quiet holds space for wonder. You do not fill every gap with explanation because you understand that some meanings season better overnight. You are willing to say, "Let's see," and mean it. You are willing to visit the unknown at visiting hours and not try to move in. The unknown appreciates such manners. It begins to cooperate. It sends little clarities like birds come to check a still pond for drinkable water. She learns that questions can be companions and not judges, that curiosity can be fidelity and not flirtation with doubt. She becomes interested in accuracy, not in victory, because accuracy is what stillness can carry without spill. There is an austerity to you that is not severe. It is clean. Clean of manipulation. Clean of the need to be center stage. Clean of the thirst that turns people into objects and time into an obstacle to fame. This cleanliness is why her shoulders lower when you enter. Predators thrive in murk. Craftsmen prefer light. You are a craftsman of hours. You build them to last by doing unattractive things consistently. Leaving on time, checking your math, feeding your body so it doesn't make the soul pay for low blood sugar, telling the truth early. She learns to trust not your promises, but your patterns. Patterns are what hold when the mood shifts and the weather forgets how to be kind. And then there's the matter of desire. The world told her the loudest want wins. The world lied. The want she trusts in you is not loud, it is lucid. It does not try to accelerate what meaning must grow. It does not lean on her no until it bends. It does not make her yes responsible for your hunger. Your want stands, hat in hand, at the gate of reality and waits to see whether the field is dry enough to walk. When it is, you enter without trampling. When it is not, you bless the gate and return tomorrow with water for the path. This is not romance by fireworks. It is the courtship of a weathered world by a man who knows the logic of rain. She loves you for it without needing to say so. Her breath says it for her with every calm exhale. You are not chosen for the face you carry into a mirror that mistakes symmetry for salvation. You are chosen because your quiet carries a world back to itself without fanfare. Shape by shape, hour by hour, you disarm the alarms that took up residence in her ribs. The part of her that lived on the edge of every moment, ready to run, learns the geography of return. Return to breath, to pace, to the unmarketable mercy of a day that works. She finds at last the stillness she had been searching for in 1,000 glittering rooms, a stillness that does not turn her into a statue, but into a steward of her own alive and sovereign life. And when she calls your energy home, it is not a metaphor. It is a report from the body, newly housed in peace. Chosen one, long before admiration arrives dressed in language, her body has already rendered a verdict. It does not consult memory for gossip or the future for guarantees. It notices weather. It keeps a ledger of micro-signals that most minds are too hurried to count. The way you approach a threshold, as if the doorway has rights. The way your eyes rest without requisition. The way your voice refuses the volume that turns presence into pressure. 1,000 quiet measures become one large permission. Breath returns to its original job. Inhale stops arriving like a courier running uphill. Exhale stops crawling out as if it needs a permit. Air moves, and with it, the long-held alarms unhook themselves from the ribs and go stand outside to listen to rain. She doesn't have to tell herself to relax. Something older does that for her. The shoulders lower by a half-inch, but the half-inch changes the room. Posture questions that once exhausted her. Do I need to defend my space? Am I being evaluated? Will my no be turned into an obstacle course? Sit down like employees who learn a new policy and realize they can go home at 5. You did not persuade this ease into existence with speeches. You kept standards that bodies respect. You arrive when you said you would and let the clock be a servant instead of a stage. You let silence be a tool instead of a trap. You let listening be a practice instead of a tactic. The body recognizes craft even when the mind is still looking for charm. Predators use confusion to make themselves necessary. You do the opposite. You make yourself legible. Legibility is mercy at the cellular level. It lets a person stop budgeting for surprises. Your no is a door that closes without slamming. Your yes is a path that holds underfoot. Around such mechanics, vigilance retires from its unpaid overtime. The sentry accepts a desk job. It keeps watch without keeping score. The nervous system, relieved of running the whole show, returns the microphone to curiosity. Curiosity is the first sign that safety has arrived. It asks real questions. It doesn't interrogate. It does not take notes for leverage. It wanders a little. It laughs at precise moments that let the room breathe. Your steadiness is not a coat you put on for company. It's the way your interior furniture fits together. You have done the unphotographable work. Quiet repairs after loud mistakes. Choosing sleep over spectacle so tomorrow has a chance. Practicing exit without leaving damage. Practicing entry without demanding worship. These repetitions changed your gravity. Gravity is the language the body trusts most. It feels whether a person is anchored to something larger than appetite. Anchored people don't drift into others hoping to be held up. They stand, and because they stand, others can sit without shrinking. There is a relief in the pace you keep. You do not punish slowness because you know meaning travels at that speed. You do not agitate for answers because you know that good answers are shy and come when rooms are kind. You do not lean on a moment until it confesses something it will resent later. The body hears this de-escalation and stops preparing rebuttals. Muscles that used to harden at the beginning of every sentence stay available for gestures that demonstrate understanding instead of defense. Hands unclench and become instruments again. Cup touch, right, point to the window when the sky is doing something worth seeing. A trustworthy nervous system recognizes another by the way it handles heat. Heat in you is housed. It is not a roaming force looking for combustion to prove it's alive. Housed heat gives good light. It reveals rather than interrogates. In that light, she finds herself speaking truths that do not require circus tricks to be heard. The tone changes first. It drops out of performance and lands in the register where a life can be built. Words are measured to fit, the way a carpenter measures twice and cuts once. Accuracy becomes affection. There is no rush to decide. Conclusions arrive like well-made bread, risen, shaped, baked through. When surprise visits, as it will in any honest hour, you do not let adrenaline audition for leadership. You keep the reins on your own pulse and let the moment choose how loud it needs to be. Sometimes loudness is the right size. Often it isn't. You do not make it louder to prove you're engaged. Engagement, in your keeping, looks like attention that returns what it borrows. Like questions that land without leaving dents, like corrections that cut at the seam instead of through the cloth. She notices the difference. Her body stops doing complicated math to protect dignity and starts doing simple arithmetic to keep the conversation honest. In your absence, the trust you made possible does not collapse. This is how she knows it isn't dependent. It's calibrated. You leave like a craftsman leaves a room. Tools put away, hinge oiled, lamp at human height, door closed softly. The nervous system reads the closing as a promise rather than as a threat. It doesn't scramble to back up the files. It goes on with its day. When an old alarm wakes at midnight and insists that warmth is a preface to harm, she has new evidence to put on the counter. Exits that did not turn into traps, requests that were not turned into debts, desire that did not try to buy a vote. Evidence persuades fear to sit down faster than reassurance ever will. Your presence teaches her body to spend less of itself on survival and more on seeing. Seeing is expensive when the cost of being wrong is humiliation. In your field, the cost is measured and fair. Mistakes are mended, they are not weaponized. Disagreements ask for better sentences, not for smaller selves. This fairness restores appetite for learning. Appetite for learning is the first sign that the soul trusts it will not be punished for growth. She begins to try things in your presence that she would not risk under judges. Not to impress you, but because her aliveness wants to move. There is a point at which trust stops being a feeling and becomes a reflex. The body no longer checks every doorway for the fastest exit. It checks for the best chair. It asks for water without apologizing. It says no in a tone that keeps tomorrow available. It says yes without converting yes into a liability. These are small liturgies. They change lives. None of them require speeches. They require standards. You keep the standards, and the body keeps the peace. Later, when someone asks why she settled near you the way birds find a certain branch, she may shrug and say something that sounds too simple to be true. I could breathe. But that is the most truthful measure any body will ever give. Breath is the original ballot. It votes for home. Chosen one, attraction that begins with costume is priced in upkeep and the bill arrives fast. Attraction that begins with truth is provisioned by reality, and reality knows how to feed what it blesses. You do not lead with ornament, you lead with orientation. Your north does not move to flatter a mood. You don't stretch a boundary to win a moment or shrink a value to keep applause. Consistency is not a posture in you. It's a covenant. The covenant is what her soul feels and names as desire. Not the fevered kind that burns through good timber, but the steady warmth that makes rooms habitable through winter. Truth in you is not a weapon you enjoy unsheathing. It is a tool you honor. Tools live by oaths. They are cleaned, stored, used for repair rather than for spectacle. When you speak a hard sentence, it comes with the aim and restraint of a surgeon. You cut to save, not to show. Hearing truth handled like this, her body does not flinch. It focuses. Focus is a form of respect. It means her attention believes it will not be punished for listening. It means the mind and the heart can work together without one having to play guard for the other. In that collaboration, attraction stops being a storm and becomes a season. Predictable enough to plant in, alive enough to keep wonder fed. Your desire does not hunt for leverage. It seeks alignment. Alignment is the opposite of conquest. It asks whether two lives can keep faith with themselves and with each other at the same time. It honors the geometry of distance and nearness. It understands that intimacy without edges becomes flood, and flood calls itself ocean while dismantling the house. You keep banks on the river. Banks are not cruelty. They are kindness that refuses to call chaos romance. In the banks, the water can sing. It has shape, speed, eddy, pause. She senses in your restraint, not deprivation, but design. Want feels safer when it is willing to stay inside the shape that keeps beauty from turning into aftermath. Truth changes the flavor of closeness. It turns consent from a checkpoint into a climate. Climate is always on. It doesn't need to be announced. You keep it with small, repeatable acts. The way you verify before you assume, the way you ask without recruiting guilt to help, the way you receive no as information instead of opposition, the way you let yes be revisited without charging a fee. Around these habits, her attraction expands from fascination into trust. Trust lets desire put down roots. Rooted desire grows sweetness that does not spoil in daylight. There is nothing in you that asks her to become less accurate to stay desirable. Accuracy in her is not your rival. It is your relief. You would rather be loved by a clear person slowly than adored by a confused person quickly. This preference is rare enough to feel like myth. It is also the only preference that keeps love from becoming a theater of avoidance. Accuracy asks good questions, and you do not punish good questions for their timing. You do not answer everything you cannot. You name the edges of your knowledge and let the unknown keep its dignity. Humility like this is magnetic because it's useful. It tells her that when you don't know, you won't fake it and make her pay the interest later. Attraction rooted in truth makes repair honorable. You do not protect your image at the expense of the atmosphere. If you miss a step, you say so in a tone that does not enlist pity or demand praise for honesty. You adjust your behavior where the harm occurred. You do not perform remorse in one room and leave the broken hinge squeaking in another. She reads this as literacy in love's only grammar that lasts. Noun, action, verb change, adjective consistent. The body loves literacy. It stops preparing for the next spin and shows up for the work at hand. You are uninterested in the counterfeit intimacy of oversharing. You do not fling your insides onto the table as a shortcut to closeness. You disclose at the speed that trust can metabolize. You don't hoard either. You give enough for meaning to stand up. This proportion is rare and therefore erotic in the way a well-made chair is erotic to a tired body. It fits, it holds, it does not wobble. She is attracted to the fit, not to the flash. Fit tells her tomorrow will recognize today instead of pretending not to know it once the lights change. Because your attraction is aligned with truth, it plays well with freedom. Freedom in you is not a slogan you wear when convenient. It is the quiet way you keep exits visible and entries honest. It is the way you refuse to make her sovereignty the price of your security. You secure yourself where security belongs, in your practices, in your friendships, in the disciplines that return you to yourself when applause or absence tries to rearrange your center. Watching you, she stops bracing for the tax. Most closeness collects. The slow fees levied against laughter, rest, ambition, boundaries. No invoices arrive. When someone doesn't bill you for being whole, you want to stay. Truth does not need to be dressed to be compelling, but it appreciates good manners. You have them. You deliver the exact amount of seriousness the moment asks for, and no more. You do not make a virtue of heaviness or an addiction of lightness. You balance in the moving air because you check your footing and you check hers. Balance is not show, it is safety. Safety is not a sedative, it is a stimulant that brings color back to skin and courage back to questions. She notices how she grows braver near you, not reckless, not numb, but willing to occupy her own life with less apology. Attraction that grows courage is attraction worth trusting. There will be offers to trade truth for influence, to trade steadiness for story, to trade standards for a glittering detour. You decline without ceremony. Ceremony would make a scene of integrity, and you are not in the scene business. You are in the continuity business, the art of remaining recognizable to yourself across rooms and seasons. Continuity is wildly attractive to nervous systems that have been made to live on cliff edges. It says, "The ground will be ground tomorrow." It says, "If I need to change my mind, I will bring you into the process rather than present you with a verdict." It says, "You will not learn what I mean by watching what I punish. You will learn it by watching what I keep." In the end, truth-backed attraction is not an event. It is a habitat. Habitats don't shout, they support. The proof that support is real is found after you leave. She discovers that her compass did not spin, it settled. She finds herself setting her own lamp at a human height, placing her own chair to face faces, speaking her own yes and no in voices that keep tomorrow strong. She is more herself in the wake of you than she was in the shine of you, and that is the only metric that matters. Looks fade, trends molt, electricity tires. But a life oriented to true keeps pointing, keeps planting, keeps returning with bread for the table it helps set. Your energy feels like home because it is built of decisions that homes require. Clean edges, honest heat, good exits, better returns. That is what her body trusts. That is what her soul remembers. That is why attraction here is not a chase but a choosing. Chosen one, a life can forget its own shoreline while standing a few steps from the water. She has wandered through cities of noise and theaters of promise and houses where praise cost more than it paid. And still the map kept pointing her to later. Then you arrived with no banner and even less argument, and the map stopped advertising distance. You did not beckon. You held your ground as if ground could be holy when kept. Something inside her, older than plans and prettier than panic, recognized the stance. It was not a summons. It was a remembering. The body turned toward you the way a field turns toward rain. It recognizes by temperature, not by rumor. The first proof was small and decisive. She exhaled as if the air had finally come home from a long errand. Return is not a romance you perform. It is a geometry you keep. You do not orbit to be seen. You remain to be usable. The hour notices and begins to solve for peace. Doors do not audition as traps. Windows open precisely enough to keep the weather honest. The clock forgets how to pant. She has no paperwork to show for it, no thesis to explain why proximity to you lets her spine remember its original architecture. She only knows the way her yes stops negotiating for permission and her no stops needing witness protection. These are not fireworks. They are furniture. They are what the soul recognizes as home, a room where the truth can stand up without shoes and still be respected. You are not a detour dressed as destiny. You are the return point that refuses to charge a toll for orientation. This is why you never push. Pushing is what a man does when he doubts his weather. You keep your weather. You keep your heat in a lantern with clear glass. You keep your voice at a human volume even when thunder tries to rent your mouth. You keep your hands from rearranging her house to prove you know where things belong. Because you keep, she recovers what the world told her was extravagant. Pace. Exactness, the right to let a question finish evaporating before it becomes a conclusion. She does not rush to confess or collapse. She walks back to herself with the dignity of someone whose name was never for sale. There is a humility to return that spectacle cannot imitate. Spectacle wants to be discussed. Return wants to be used. You bring bread, not legend. You bring water, not weather reports. You bring the sentence that matches the weight of the moment instead of the story that tries to lift it by applause. She learns from these proportions. She begins to speak to her own life in the tone your presence taught the room, accurate, unhurried, faithful to what can be carried. The old habit of turning every threshold into a trial retires. Doorways go back to being doorways. Choices stop pretending to be courts. She stops borrowing intensity to make meaning look expensive and starts practicing the small mercies that keep meaning solvent. Return is most holy when it includes a way to leave. You keep exits soft. You do not harden them to trap. You do not perfume them to seduce regret. You leave a hinge oiled and a light on, not as a promise of your permanence, but as a proof of your standard. She can step away and the compass will not spin. It points because you never moved the north to flatter your mood. Absence remains honest in your economy. It does not become a punishment or a pilgrimage. It becomes a place to carry the same sanity you modeled in person. This is the difference between a man who performs safety and a man who is safe. The performance collapses when the stage is empty. Safety keeps its shape even when no one is watching. On the days when grief comes, return does not try to outshine it. You make space. Space is a bigger kindness than advice. You set the kettle at the temperature sorrow can drink. You do not ask it for a thesis. You let it be weather and you keep the roof. Keeping the roof is not glamorous, it is godly. Her body draws a fierce conclusion. Love here does not demand entertainment in a crisis. Love here remembers that being held together is a skill. She learns to take that skill into rooms that never taught it. Suddenly meetings have more oxygen. Arguments stop billing themselves as epics. Farewells land without weaponizing tomorrow. Return has multiplied in the quiet way all real holiness behaves when it is not branded. The return point you are is not a monument. It is a waypoint. Waypoints neither possess nor vanish. They remain, so that lives can pass through and become more themselves by the passing. You do not harvest loyalty from the traffic. You refuse the cheap magic of turning gratitude into gravity. Gratitude left unharvested becomes courage. She uses it to tell a truer yes in places where the price used to frighten her, to speak a kinder no in rooms that punish clarity, to rest without defending rest as a productivity hack. She begins to understand that home is not where perfection lives. Home is where repair is practiced early and without spectacle. You did not lecture her into this. You let her watch you replace a hinge instead of writing a poem about doors. There is a phenomenon the world mistakes for love. The spike, the high, the dizziness at the edge of the cliff. You are not that cliff. You are the safe edge where a life can look far without feeling obligated to jump. Your steadiness makes looking itself a form of worship. She leans, not to fall, but to see. Seeing becomes leisure again, unrented by panic, unmonetized by spectacle. The hunger that once masqueraded as passion loses its argument. Passion, returned to its right scale, becomes heat that protects instead of heat that performs. Heat like that builds a kitchen where hunger and holiness share a table and no one is drafted as entertainment. In time, she will forget which sentence of yours convinced her that return was not a defeat. She will only remember the taste of the hour around you, the way it refused to collect a tax for being alive, the way it kept breath at a length that didn't bankrupt the next moment, the way it spoke truth early enough that repair could be small and honor could be quiet. If you meet again, the air will not host an auction. There will be bread, there will be the old, unremarkable miracle of a door that opens and a hinge that doesn't complain. You will sit in the geography you kept, and the compass will rest between you, idle because it is unanimous. You were never the destination. You were the proof that destinations exist for lives that prefer to walk home. Chosen one, the mirror is a poor cartographer of the terrain that matters. It maps light and line and the angle of a jaw, but it cannot plot the pressure in a room when you enter. The way the air chooses a calmer physics, the way laughter lowers its octave as if it has found its chest again. What makes you beautiful is not image, it is influence. Quiet, lawful, repeatable. A camera could spend a year in your company and miss it because your beauty prefers verbs to poses. It is felt in the body first, before the mind can order adjectives. Ask her to describe it, and she will reach for the weather report. The sky behaved, the windows didn't sweat. The wind stopped selling drama and started moving truth. Felt beauty does not declare itself. It keeps conditions. It is the lamp set at human height so faces don't have to squint to be real. It is the sentence that fits the room rather than the ego. It is the exit that closes without teaching the door resentment. It is the apology that mends at the seam and retires, unphotographed. These are small arts, and they are how days become inhabitable. The feminine does not trust beauty that spends her. She trusts beauty that lowers the cost of being whole. You lower that cost without billing for it. In your field, her shoulders stop impersonating battlements. Her voice stops paying a surcharge to be taken seriously. Her laughter stops earning its keep with sparkle and starts keeping time with peace.